Welcome back. A community designed for people living with dementia is taking shape in Sheboygan County. And today, people got a chance to learn more about what's being called a first of its kind dementia village and how its founders hope it can help people maintain their independence and quality of life. Elise Noe joining us in the studio with more on how this village works. Elise.
Well, Cammie, for many people living with dementia, loss of independence can be one of the most difficult parts of the disease. As memory and cognitive abilities decline, everyday activities often become more restricted. But a new development in the town of Wilson is aiming to change that. It's called Levesu, and it's designed as a neighborhood where people living with dementia can own their own homes while having access to care and support as needed. The community includes walking paths, gathering spaces, and other amenities intended to help residents stay active, social, and engaged in daily life. The goal is to create an environment that focuses on what people can still do rather than what the disease has taken away.
Safety at all costs is really needs to be flipped on its head a little bit. We need to rethink that. And what is the cost? The cost is the loss of personhood. It's the loss of living life, because we all take risk. So we need to change the way we think about care and support to be able to focus more on quality and dignity rather than on quantity with no quality.
The concept was inspired by a dementia village in the Netherlands. 40 homes are currently under development, with the first homes expected to be ready for residents later this year and additional expansions planned. Cammie.